Ryan M. Shepherd 92 asks, do you have a girlfriend or wife? And Lieber Anarchy asks, rather straightforwardly, what is your sexual orientation? Now, if I were to place myself on the Kinsey scale, I would probably end up around a 4.5. And I think that you can see that the implications of that fact and my religious background and my nearly complete social isolation had potentially cataclysmic consequences. And indeed, they had cataclysmic consequences. I knew this, my orientation, pretty early on after the onset of puberty. Pretty much when I was 14 years old, going on 15. And so very quickly after that, because of the religious beliefs which I had, and given the denomination, to call it that, of Christianity, into which I was indoctrinated, led to believe that this was the absolute truth, and there was absolutely no need to question it or search for other answers. I became convinced that there was something fundamentally wrong with me, and because of that, I needed to do everything that I could in order to hide it. So I did. But, pretty much the immediate consequences of this were completely obliterating any self-confidence or ambition that I once had. And, even to the point where it would impede my ability to focus because, I'm so incredibly worried that, someone's going to find out. And a pile on top of that, the fact that my mom and my dad were both very heavily involved in church ministry, and I felt, that I had their reputation to uphold. I didn't want there to be some kind of scandal that would affect their positions of ministry to which they felt they had been called. So this led to being in kind of a depressive guilt cycle for a very, 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 very long time. Kind of related to that, I think, Narcissa the Cat asks, what's your academic discipline that you love to geek out to? I really don't have one. And part of the reason that is also I kind of had ingrained into me that because of the circumstances, I became convinced that, I'm a failure. And I'm always going to be a failure. I'm not sure how many people have had familiar feelings like that, but it was constant, and I really believed it. Let's see, Traog asks, what do you recall as the thing that started you on the path that eventually led to deconverting? So there came a point in time where, I was finally able to talk to some people about these issues, which I had experienced for many years at that point. And I felt that I was making some personal progress to the point where I was at least beginning to feel a little comfortable with myself, rather than hating myself all the time and thinking that I deserved, punishment and scorn, simply for what I considered to be thought crimes. But what kind of put me in a little bit of crisis, someone who had gone to the Calvary Chapel with me, who I hadn't seen in quite some time, I was eventually able to find them on Facebook. And this person introduced me to the doctrines of Calvinism. And I tend to I tend to leap to certain conclusions when exposed to certain amounts of information. And, after making some personal progress, after being exposed to these doctrines, I became convinced that I was a reprobate, that I had been pre-selected by God to go to hell, and that there was nothing that I could do about it. Now, I thought that it made perfect sense at the time, but at the same time, I thought that I needed to start to get really serious about, why I believed the things that I said I did. And particularly, I didn't want this to be correct, because it's like I didn't feel it on one level. I considered myself to be the real thing. I had stuck with this for that long so far. Crazy Pills 2 asks, was there a defining moment in your deconversion? In other words, was there a point where you consciously remember thinking, I no longer believe? There were a couple different things where eventually I had to say that. And it was actually after going through all of the prophecies in the New Testament and looking them up in their original context, and being able to recognize that they were all fabrications, and that the New Testament writers seem to be very clear that they expected Jesus to return during their lifetime. I was still able to stuff that under the rug. The power of cognitive dissonance was that powerful. But the two things that eventually led to the weight of the evidence just becoming too overwhelming to do it anymore. I will link to a lecture from the Open Yale University course on the New Testament. This one in particular is regarding Judaism, Second Temple Judaism in the 1st century. And Professor Dale B. Martin, he goes through how apocalyptic writing, like the book of Daniel, actually works. And he explained how you can see quite easily, how the prophecy of the book of Daniel, actually includes events of which the author was already aware and is couching them in prophetic language. And the contemporary audience would recognize, oh, see, this Daniel, he already knew about these events that we can clearly see, have seen, back when he was writing this, centuries ago. They bought into that what had been written centuries before. And after they had been hooked in by that, they would also buy into the actual predictions which the writer of the book of Daniel made. None of which happened, of course. So, once I recognized that this was making too much sense, I immediately was able to come to the conclusion that the apocalyptic portions of the Gospels in the New Testament did exactly the same thing. And that led to me no longer being able to rationalize what this generation and so forth was referring to. And the other thing that pretty much did me in was reading the Apocalypse of Peter. And I'll link to the videos that I made about that. So not only that early church fathers considered something this totally insane to be authoritative, but what totally killed me at the end was actually borrowing terms for places from Greek mythology. That's the first instance where I found that. And right there, I just couldn't do it anymore. Because that helped me recognize that, yeah, this has kind of been an ongoing borrowing assimilation process. So it's kind of after that where I just couldn't do it anymore. Traog asks, does your family know, or do you feel that you need to keep it a secret from them? They don't know, but I don't feel that I need to keep it a secret from them, because their way of dealing with things is pretending that issues don't exist. So I'm sure that this would end up being the same. You know, despite whatever inner turmoil it may cause them, whatever. LJ on YT asks, what's your pet peeve? People just attempting to conjure an emotional reaction. You know, that really ticks me off. So that's why I think that I don't suffer trolls very well. So if some Christian troll, you know, is going to come onto my profile and copy and paste something from Genesis 19, Leviticus 18:22, Leviticus 20:13, Romans 1:26 through 27, 1 Corinthians 6:9 through 10, or 1 Timothy 1:9 through 10, they will be blocked. Not because I'm going to take offense. You might as well attempt to condemn me with quotations from Aesop's fables. But rather, you have illustrated to me your complete inability to form your own thoughts. And because of that, you're not going to be worth my time. So that is why you will be blocked if you attempt to do that. And one last thing that I would like to direct towards one particular viewer. Now, I think up to this point, you and I have had some fairly amiable discourse. However, there have been some videos, which I've uploaded in the past, that it would seem to me that, based upon the information which you may now have, you may believe that I should be executed in public. So, my question for you would be, if I happened to be walking down the city block where you happen to live, would you be the person to strike the first blow? Now, if you think that I'm misrepresenting your position, feel free to comment on this video. I think that's it for now. I'll talk to you guys later.